So, during last week's video, I uttered this line. Next week, I'll be releasing a video talking about Lockwood as well, just for completionist's sake. So, yeah, that's going to be this video. We're going to be talking about not only the first woman to practice law in front of the US Supreme Court, but also the first or second, opinions differ, female presidential candidate, Belva Ann Lockwood. Belva Ann Lockwood, born with the last name Bennett, was born on October the 24th of 1830 in Royalton, New York. She was the second daughter and second of 5 children to farmers Lewis J. and Hannah Bennett. She was raised in a very Catholic family and took the Bible literally. From a young age, she would attempt to replicate the miracles that were described within the text, such as attempting to walk on water, raise the dead, and move a hill. Though all the attempts as a child, she was not successful, but that motivation to mimic the miracles drove her to pursue a life of aiding the living, something that she would hold for the rest of her life. Belva would be taught in a single-room school in Niagara County, New York. At age 14, she graduated the school and was immediately offered a summer teaching job by the local school board. While men were normally the teachers, they would largely only teach during the winter months when boys weren't needed on the fields. And during the summer months, women would normally take over and teach the girls and younger children. Belva would enroll into the Royalton Academy with the money that she saved during her time teaching. While she later wanted to attend college, her father was fully against the idea, as it was being unladylike, and insisted that she marry instead. And that she did, at the age of 18. She would marry 22-year-old Uriel McNall, a farmer and sawmiller, soon bearing a child of his. While McNall was a hard worker, he soon suffered a major injury at his mill. His right foot was caught in the machinery, and while he would survive for 2 years, his health kept declining as time went on, and eventually tuberculosis would claim his life. Bevel would be left alone to take care of their 3-year-old child, and to make sure that her and her child had the funds needed to continue to live, she decided that seeking higher education would be the best course of action, and she used what little money she had left to enroll in Gaspard Academy, a secondary school with a college preparation in mind, and she'd eventually go to the Gen C. Williamson Seminar in 1854. Upon graduating, Belva was offered a supervisory position at a common school near her hometown of Royalton. There, she would oversee 3 teachers and act as a general administrator. And during this time is when her plight towards equality pay for equal work would become a center issue of her personality. As a widowed mother, Belva would have a salary of around $400. However, the male teacher, someone that was technically in a loyal position to her, would receive $600 a year. She issued complaints to the school board about the difference in pay, but of course it was ignored. But Belva continued to teach for nearly a decade before moving to Washington, D.C. in 1866, where she would take her equal fight pay to Congress. Belva had become involved in the women's rights movement, and while living in the capital, she discovered that female government employees earn less than men, and the civil service limited the number of female clerks who could be hired. Belva heavily lobbied Representative Samuel Arnold, chairman of the House Committee on Education and Labor, and pressured him to introduce legislation to mandate equal pay for federal workers and outlaw discrimination in hiring based on gender. Arnold was sympathetic to women's issues, having already introduced a bill to give married women in D.C. property rights, and in 1870 he submitted House Resolution 1571 to the floor, which had been drafted in part by Belva's input. Yet, by the time that the bill passed in 1872, it had become so watered down that it merely authorized federal departments to appoint women to higher level clerk positions, and also had the ability to offer them the same compensation as men, but it didn't require departments to do so. The bill also lifted the cap on the number of female clerks that could be hired, which, while less radical than Belleville's original draft, the new law did help women somewhat. During the 1870s, the percentage of women working for the Treasury Department and being paid over $900 increased from 4% to 20%, but it was only a minor improvement. While in DC, Belva would marry clergyman and dentist by the name of Ezekiel Lockwood in 1867, with her taking his surname as her own. Her interest for law would stem from this marriage, as she aided Ezekiel in his side business, where he was also a veterans pension claims agent, someone who made sure that the vast amount of veterans from the Civil War and previous got their pay. From that, she would apply to the National University, which had just opened in 1870, and she applied for a law degree along with a handful of other women. While she and only one other woman would eventually complete the course, backlash from other male students and various staff resulted in neither getting granted a degree, even though both had completed the full course. Eventually, she'd be able to get the degree after having to write multiple letters to both the staff and eventually to the current president at the time, Ulysses S. Grant. Ezekiel made a name for himself and made the necessary connections to win letters of guardianship from the court. Eventually, Belva was also earning fees as a court-appointed guardian, plus smaller fees through copying and admin roles. As an agent, Ezekiel also pursued land and treaty claims on behalf of the Native American clients, something that Belva herself would later pursue in her life. While she had access to the DC Circuit Courts, she was unable to practice in front of federal courts, as the law forbid women from doing so. This, yet again, Belva set about changing. She would draft a bill in 1876 and managed to get Representative John M. Glover of Ohio to introduce it to the House Judiciary Committee, with it being submitted to the floor unanimously. On February the 26th of 1878, the House would pass this bill, and it would spend a year working its way through the more conservative Senate, facing considerable opposition, but was eventually passed with bipartisan support. Later the following year, Lockwood would become the first woman lawyer to argue a case before the U.S. Supreme Court, arguing the Kaiser v. Stickner and later the United States v. Cherokee Nation. Lockwood later sponsored Samuel R. Laurer to the Supreme Court bar, making him the fifth black attorney to be admitted, and ultimately the first to argue a case before the court. In 1884, Marita Stowe, a California women's activist, was the leader of the Equal Rights Party. Stowe wished to nominate a woman for president, and Belva caught her attention when the lawyer wrote a letter to the Woman's Herald, stating her belief that women should run for office and expressing her frustration with the Republican Party. Predominant suffrage advocates such as Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Stanton advocated support for the Republicans, in hopes that a GOP president and Republican majority could be influenced to pass a women's suffrage amendment. But Belva was tired of this approach, and during the summer of 1884, she had attended the Republican National Convention in Chicago and appeared before the Resolutions Committee to request that equal rights be added to the party's platform, a request that was essentially ignored. Instead of trying to integrate themselves with the current political parties, Belva argued that suffrage supporters should form their own. The Equal Rights Party officially nominated Belva Lockwood to the presidency at an August of 1884 meeting. Belva did not know of their plans to do this, but soon received a letter informing her that she's been selected as the party's nominee. And after spending a few days thinking it over, Belva wrote a letter accepting the nomination and laying out her platform. A platform which advocated for temperance, revision of divorce and inheritance laws, equal representation for women in politics and government, and the establishment of an international court of arbitration to solve disputes between countries, among a number of other positions. Belva took campaigning seriously. She gave speeches in Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, Louisville, Cleveland, and a number of other cities from September to November of 1884. Men across the country, amused by the idea of a woman running for president, formed Belva Lockwood's clubs, which held fox rallies where cross-dressing men pretended to be Lockwood and her supporters, giving fake speeches and holding satirical parades. In addition to this pretend support, Belva also found real supporters, and come election day, she became the first woman to receive votes for president, somewhere in the range of 4,000 to 6,000. Though it was disputed by her and a number of her supporters that the ballots that had been tossed out favored her, and her 1888 run was significantly less well received even by former allies. This was in part since she never really managed to find a niche within the suffrage movement, pushing for both rather popular positions such as temperance, while also being in support of much more controversial subjects, such as the practice of polygamy by the Mormon population. After the attempted foray of president, Belva would not seek higher office, and instead she would focus on her activism and legal work, which was still met with success and admiration by some. After her return, she continued her work in the women's rights movement and was instrumental in the formation of a law granting women in the District of Columbia equal property rights and equal child custody. Later on, she drafted amendments to the statehood bills of Oklahoma, Arizona, and New Mexico, which allowed women in these states the right to vote. Until the illness that would take her life, she was marching on the streets of the capital in support of women's suffrage and international peace. She would die in Washington, D.C. in 1917 at the age of 86, merely 1 year after the first woman was elected to Congress and 3 years before the passing of the 19th Amendment. I hope you enjoyed the brief look into one of the more forgotten individuals that played an influential part in the United States history. If there's a topic that you'd like me to cover in the future, say so down in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you all next time.